Hi there, and welcome to Mr. T's Maths. In this video, I'll be showing you how to find the coordinates of the midpoint of a segment. So let's go ahead and see how we can find the coordinates of the midpoint by using this graphical representation. We have 2 points A and B. The coordinates of point A are 2, 1. The coordinates of point B are 4, 5, as it can be observed from the picture. And just by inspecting this graphical representation of the 2 points and the segment, you can probably see that the midpoint will fall at this position and will have coordinates 3, 3. Yeah? Okay, that's great if we have a graphical representation, but I would like us to eventually find a formula to work this out without representing this graphically. So how can we find these coordinates, the x component and the y component? Well, first let's have a look at the x component. Okay, so if we just show the x coordinate of A, which is 2 in this case, and just have a look at the x component of B, which is 4. Now again, you can probably see that the midpoint, it's very obvious that the midpoint between 2 and 4 is 3. But how can we calculate this algebraically? Well, to work out the midpoint between two numbers, we have to actually work out the mean of those two numbers. Okay, remember, to work out the mean, you add up the values and divide by how many there are. So in this case we have 2 values, 2 plus 4, and we divide by the number of values, which is 2. So 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And this is our x component, as you can see, of the midpoint. Now we will do exactly the same thing for the y coordinate or y component of the midpoint. The y component of B is 5 and the y component of A is 1. Again, just by observing this graphical representation, you can probably see that obviously the midpoint between 5 and 1 is 3, but again we want an algebraic method, okay, of finding the answer. So to find the midpoint, we have to work out the mean between the two y components. So 1 plus 5, we add them and divide by how many there are. There are 2 values, is equal to 6 over 2, which is 3. And that's how we find the midpoint using an algebraic method, okay, which is much more useful because we won't have to show the graphical representation. Okay, now I'd like us to come up with a formula. So think of what you have done. Okay, so think of what you have done to work out this x component of the midpoint, this x component. Well, to work out the x component, we've actually added, 2 is one of the x coordinates, 4 is the second one. So to work out that x component of the midpoint, we've actually worked out the mean of the x components of our 2 points A and B. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and that gives us the x component of the midpoint. And I'll use a different color there. We did exactly the same thing for the y component, but let's think of a more general way of showing this. Now, if we take 1 to be y1, okay, and 5, the y component of the second point B in this case, will be the second y component, then what we have done here to find the y component of the midpoint was to add the two components, the two y coordinates or components, and divide by how many there were, which was 2. And we can actually observe that we came up with a formula, and this is the formula to work out the midpoint, okay, of a segment. So we take the average of the x components will give us the x component of the midpoint. The average of the y components will give us the y component of the midpoint. By the way, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, if you want to have access to more content like this one. Okay, here I have some examples. So let's go ahead and put this formula to practice. I'm going to write it here at the top. So the formula of the midpoint is the mean of the x components, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. That gives us the x component of the midpoint, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2 gives us the y component of the midpoint. So we will start with A. To find the x coordinate of the midpoint, we work out the average of the x coordinates of A and B. So 2 plus 10 divided by 2, which is 12 over 2, and that is 6. And to find the y coordinate, we work out the mean between the y coordinates. Now make sure you don't get confused here, so you might want to label this as xy, xy to avoid confusion. Yeah, so 5 plus 7 divided by 2, which is 12 over 2, and that's 6. So the coordinates of the midpoint in this case are 6, 6. Now feel free to pause the video and try these examples yourselves. Okay, let's go ahead and do B. I'll use green to just differentiate between the examples. So again, we have the mean of the x coordinates, 8 plus 2 over 2, which is 10 over 2, and that's 5. And then the y coordinate will be the mean of the y coordinates of A and B. So 1 plus 6 over 2, which is 7 over 2, and you can leave it as a fraction or you can just write it as a decimal, 3.5. So in this case, M will have coordinates 5 and 3.5. Okay, and let me change the color for the next one. Let's choose blue. So the x component is the average between the x coordinates, yeah. So minus 3 plus 5 divided by 2. Minus 3 plus 5 is 2. 2 over 2 is equal to 1. And the y coordinate will be minus 4. Now be careful, it's minus 4 plus minus 2, which is the same as minus 4 minus 2, yeah. So minus 4 plus minus here is negative, so minus 4 minus 2 is minus 6 over 2, which is minus 3. So the midpoint will have coordinates 1 and minus 3. And the last example, let's choose orange for the last example. So x will be given by the mean between the x coordinates of A and B. So it's 3 plus minus 9 over 2. Now plus minus is negative, so it's the same as 3 minus 9. 3 minus 9 is minus 6 over 2, which is minus 3. and the y coordinate will be given by the mean of the y components of a and b. So minus 5 plus 6 over 2 equals minus 5 plus 6 is 1 over 2, and we can leave it like that or give it as a decimal. Well, let's leave this example using fraction mode here. So the coordinates of the midpoint are minus 3 and half. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give a thumbs up. Okay, I hope you feel much more confident now with finding the coordinates of the midpoint, and don't forget the formula, which is very useful. Okay, and for any questions, please use the comment below. Take care.